It was supposed to be a quiet day for Jonathan Cole, a local journalist covering small-town politics. But when an anonymous letter led him to an abandoned schoolhouse, he stumbled upon a forgotten piece of history, one that powerful people had worked decades to erase. Who was Margaret Delaney, and why had she vanished 40 years ago? Why did the old files hidden beneath the school floorboards expose a conspiracy that stretched to the highest levels of city government? The deeper Jonathan dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an old scandal. This was a crime still unfolding today, a cover-up so sinister it had reshaped the entire city. Before we uncover the shocking truth, comment below where you're watching from. And if you love stories of justice, resilience, and untold history, make sure to like and subscribe. Jonathan Cole had been chasing dead-end stories for years. Local politics, minor scandals, nothing groundbreaking. But then, a plain envelope arrived at his desk. No return address, just his name typed in block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper. They buried her, but her voice still speaks. Find the schoolhouse on Eaton Street. Look beneath room 3. There was no signature, no explanation. Just a feeling. A weight in Jonathan's gut that told him he was stepping into something far bigger than he imagined. The Eaton Street School had been abandoned for decades, a crumbling ruin from a past most people had forgotten. But when Jonathan pried open the rusted lock and stepped inside, he found more than just dust and decay. Beneath the floorboards of room 3, hidden under layers of time and silence, was a box of files, records, photographs, newspaper clippings, and at the center of it all, one name appeared again and again. Margaret Delaney, a teacher, a civil rights activist, a woman who had tried to expose corruption, until she vanished without a trace in 1983. 40 years ago, Margaret Delaney had been one of the few black teachers at Eaton Street School. She wasn't just an educator, she was an activist, fighting for fair housing, equal education, and exposing discrimination in local politics. According to the files, Margaret had uncovered something big. The documents detailed a conspiracy by the city's wealthy elites to systematically drive black families out of the key neighborhoods, using illegal housing ordinances, predatory loans, and aggressive policing to force people from their homes. It was all designed to keep property values high, ensuring that only white families could afford to live in the city's most desirable districts. Margaret had planned to expose it all, and then she disappeared. The official story? Margaret left town. She was unstable. She had personal issues, but Jonathan had evidence that said otherwise. Handwritten notes from Margaret, dated just days before she vanished. They know, I don't have much time. If anything happens to me, don't let the truth die with me. Jonathan wasn't the only one who remembered Margaret. As he started asking questions, he met Eleanor Banks, a retired nurse who had lived in the city for over 50 years. She had been Margaret's friend, the last person to see her alive. They didn't just erase Margaret, Eleanor told him. They erased everything she stood for. The houses she fought to protect, gone. The families she tried to help, pushed out. And the people responsible, they're still running this city. Jonathan followed the money. The same real estate companies that had profited from the forced evictions in the 80s were now the biggest political donors in the city. The same police officers who had threatened Margaret's supporters had become the city's law enforcement leaders. The corruption never ended. It evolved. Someone didn't want this story coming back to life. Because the more Jonathan investigated, the more he felt he was being watched. Digging through archived police records, Jonathan found the case file on Margaret's disappearance. But something was missing. Entire sections had been redacted or erased. Witness statements gone. Last known location unlisted. Then, buried deep in the paperwork, he found it. A police report dated March 11, 1983, 2 days after Margaret was last seen. A disturbance was reported at Eaton Street School. Officers arrived and found nothing. Case closed. But there was one problem. Jonathan had already spoken to Eleanor Banks, and Eleanor had been there that night. The police didn't find nothing. They found Margaret, and they took her away. The officers who had taken Margaret were still on the force, now high-ranking officials with decades of power behind them. And Jonathan had just uncovered their secret. 2 days later, Jonathan's apartment was broken into. His notes scattered. His computer smashed. A single sheet of paper was left on his desk. Drop it or disappear like she did. This wasn't just about Margaret anymore. This was about every family forced out of their homes, every child denied an equal education, every name erased from the city's history. Jonathan had 2 choices: walk away or finish what Margaret started. He made his decision. Jonathan didn't just publish the story. He broadcasted it, leaked police files, testimonies from families who had been forced out, financial records exposing the conspiracy that had robbed generations of their futures. And this time, the city listened. Protests erupted. Community leaders demanded action. Federal investigators arrived. The police chief resigned in disgrace. City officials were arrested. The stolen properties? Many were returned to their rightful owners. The last piece of the puzzle came 3 months later, when construction workers near Eaton Street School uncovered a shallow grave. Margaret Delaney's remains. She had never left town. She had never run away. She had been silenced, but not forgotten. And now her truth had finally been heard. What would you have done in Jonathan's place? Would you have walked away or risked everything to expose the truth? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe in stories where justice prevails, where hidden truths come to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of courage, power, and consequence.